Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to be in person.
Yeah.
Welcome to the October 16, 2023 Public Health and Safety meeting. This is a regular meeting as opposed to a special meeting. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the May 3rd meeting. Seems like an eternity ago. But any comments, corrections and whatnot?
Motion to approve.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. It's unanimous. Okay, well now it's showtime. Let's start with our first topic. We're going to discuss updates on RTM committee descriptions in Appendix B in the Town Code of Ordinances. Jack Davis is here, who chairs F&B, and Frank Kemp is here, and he chairs TGS&A, and they'll kind of run the show here and talk about the changes and solicit our input.
So first, Frank has a handout. Let's go from there.
Okay.
If I can join you, sure.
And I'm going to do a table because otherwise I can't read what I have.
Okay.
Jack, would you kind of just tee up a little bit of what?
I am going to tee it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so many years ago, the late Mark Thorne and I, when we were both on F&B, talked about, there's all these organizations that are hanging out there, and most people don't really know who's responsible in the RTM for it. So last December, I did an analysis that assigned every department, every board, every commission, every advisory group, every grant to a standing committee, saying, oh, you're primary on this, who's secondary? And there were some nuances that became about. First of all, F&B found out nobody else really had we've been working on the library for years, but didn't fit into anybody else, so we're primary on that one. We're secondary on anything financial, so we just took that off and saying, yeah, we understand, but it's really that the standing committees are that. From there, after serving for a whole bunch of time, I read the descriptions of the committees. And to say the least, I was gobsmacked. And if you don't know what that British term is, this is your gob and you go. And I read them to Kate Bush, and her mouth dropped to the floor even more than mine did. We are not responsible for the administration of departments. We're not responsible for the personnel of the departments. Yes, if you want to add an FTE on the town side, we can vote it out. But that's not what we really do. In addition, in Public Works, they had that the Public Works Department was still responsible for the incinerator. Now, I've lived in this town for a long time. I have no idea where the incinerator was. It actually happens to be where the swap shop is. Somebody actually brought in an article because that was demolished in 1993, and it was still in there. We also started to read some other things. If you remember, I'm going to say Seth. If I'm saying Seth instead of moderator, it's because Seth is the current moderator, and it's a lot easier and shorter. But at the end of every one of the meetings, Seth goes, are there any other committees that want to report on this? Well, that wasn't allowed in the ordinances. In addition, there's a lot of independent work that's been done by a lot of groups. Park and Rec is participating on the Playground Committee, and they've done a lot of good work with the commission. Well, it wasn't authorized by the Rules Committee, and hence it wasn't able to done. F&B did some joint work with the Board of Finance in creating bonding for our fire engines, cleaning up the reserve accounts where we still had money 7 years later from Superstorm Sandy sitting out there, which we returned to our taxpayers, and cleaned up the capital accounts and joint. None of that was authorized with that. It sat down and got authorized because John Zagroski and I sat down and had breakfast, and I said, hey, can we look at this jointly together? And he said, go out and prosper. All right? So this is to do a couple of things. It's to encourage people who are in the committees to look at what your committee has. And the key words that you're going to see throughout this are the terms follow, we use present tense. So following, monitoring, and reporting. Following means you're just keeping in touch of what's going on. So if you're interested in 5 Mile River, there's a 5 Mile River Commission, go look at it, see when they meet, what's going on there. Monitoring is the analysis that all the committees do. And quite honestly, as just a taxpayer, you look at certain things and you go, we're doing what? Or I really like that we're doing this. So that's the monitoring. And should something come up, that's the reporting. And so it's also coming and saying, the standing committees are independently, and you're empowered to do what your standing committee does. Now, not all standing committees work the same way. In certain cases, some chairs may say, you gotta go through me for everything. For me, if they had to go through me to speak to Kate or Jen, we'd get nothing done. Because I'd have to return the phone call and do it, and if I'm doing something else, I'm not going to get back to you. And I'm a great one to delegate and go out and do it. So each of the committees will operate under their own rules, and providing it's all within certain guidelines to do it. Also, this was written before FOIA was really in effect. It's done as Frank will say, it's done in the 70s. It was modified in the mid-'80s, and there was another modification in the mid-'90s. It was old. So there's certain things we've taken out. We've modified what rules does. We've given certain powers to the moderator, have taken some other ones away, if you want to say that. But what we've taken away with things that that the moderator wasn't doing anyway. So we went to rules with this, and this has been going on for a year. All right, break a little bit during budget time, because honestly, during budget time, this wasn't a top priority.
Zach, when we started this, I figured there'd be about 15 categories. And when the list was completed, Jack, how many are there on there now?
About 150.
That was much more complicated than we envisioned. What we have in the handout is one page of the 10-page list. And I just happened to pick PC and H's page. But this was distributed last year, November, December. You may not have a copy of it right at hand, but when you look at Public Health and Safety's list, it's just about as long as this, with the different commissions and committees and all of that under the revision of our procedures described here, you will have full charter to monitor.
Follow, monitor, and report.
And review. Finally, before turning it back to Jack, I may never get it back again, but I've got to turn it over to Jack. This is dated 10/15, and there have been other copies floating around. The Rules Committee and some of the other committees that we've been getting excellent suggestions for turns of phrase, and some of them are more important than that, which we'll discuss with you this evening. And so should you have suggestions that you already have, and we'll talk about them at this meeting, but if you have them in the next week or so, it's open season on this, where we have three more committees two or three more committees to meet with, and so that you may see a new date on the top of this. Okay, so, Jack.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, just, is it possible to have a redacted, not redacted, like a
What we
copy of
changed?
this? Yes, that shows deletions, additions, and changes?
We can send that out, and as a matter of fact, this
only
is.
from the original ordinance, because there's been a lot of changes that are going on after, anybody we work.
Mhm.
And if you keep on looking at the same document,
Yeah.
you don't see things, and then you bring it to a new pair of eyes, and all of a sudden they say, oh, you're missing a comma here, or this phrase doesn't make sense. You may know what it means, but we don't. So,
No, I want it from the original, just because it's
Frank,
very
you'll get it.
difficult to understand what's been changed or added,
Fair enough.
And then-
But
with
it's also,
a
I think
document like
what's
this.
really important is to make sure that this thing as a whole stands. that this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we understand it functioning and how we want it to function. Then go back and look at the other thing and make sure you understand how it's changed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, this is gonna be the guiding force between everything we do. So
Mhm.
let's make sure this is whole, okay?
Mhm.
And then absolutely go back and look at the
Yeah,
other one.
I think, yeah, I just think it's also helpful to look at this and look at a version that shows
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
changes and stuff.
I usually have a second copy.
A red
here, and
line,
I
sorry.
do that. But what I'm gonna go through when we're going through here is
Mhm.
going through some of the changes.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Jack,
I won't promise to do all of them.
before you kind of start line by line, if you could just explain exactly how we're going to vote on this.
You're not.
No, I don't mean us. I meant the full RTM.
Okay. What we-
How it's gonna work.
What we believe, all right, and I'm just one member of rules, so it hasn't been approved by rules. But what we're going to do, what we believe it is going to be, is this is Appendix B, Part 6. The 10 pages that we're going to be going over is going to just replace the existing Part B, Appendix B, Part 6. And it's going to be an up and down vote.
By the full RTM?
Yeah, up and down, because, that's why we're meeting with each of the committees, so we can get the input, and it's just gonna be, this is it, we are gonna we have been going back and giving, here's a big change, but every time we've had more than commas and other things like that going on, but we've had people that wanted greater clarification, and so you're gonna see that we just put it, we're gonna put it in if it makes sense. Occasionally, we run into something where we can't figure out how to write it, and it has so many exceptions to it, but it's working now, so we're just saying, we're gonna be silent on that part, because we don't wanna how to put it? This town runs in a three-legged stool. And people don't sometimes recognize, but it really is a three-legged stool. One leg is either going to be the Board of Education or the Board of Selectmen. The other leg is the Board of Finance. And the RTM is the last leg of that. And I'm not saying that we all have equal powers or other things like that, nor am I looking to achieve that. I just want the very creative people that are 100-bodied people to be able to do why they came to the RTM. They didn't come to pad their resume. They didn't come to be a rubber stamp. So, because you're dedicating a lot of time to this. So, and believe me, the town appreciates it because the RTM's come up with a lot of good things when you look at a lot of the committees that the RTM has fostered. So,
But just to be clear, what you don't want to have happen at the full RTM meeting is people raising their hands saying, I think there should be a semicolon here. That should all be done now and by the other committees.
right.
Also add that this will be reviewed, like any town code change, we act on material that's been sent to us by town council. Wayne formats it and does a certain amount of checking. What we have done in the last couple of weeks is to send Wayne a preview copy so that he knows what's coming down the pike, with the deal that once we finish our review meetings, we'll submit a clean copy to him. In that it has to do, the whole topic, 10 pages, but if we use smaller font, it wouldn't be not quite that long. But in that it has to do with the way the RTM's committees work, and it's internal. This is sort of our thing. It's not likely that town council is going to rip into it and create a whole new document. So again, we've kept him informed, and then we will submit a copy, which right now there's an apology, is that the formatting of this is a little mimsy in terms of indentations and spacings and things
Well, it's
like
big
that.
print, you can read it.
It doesn't, yeah, you can read it, I mean, put it in, Arial 16 or something like that, rather than, Jack,
Yeah.
let's go. It's
Go ahead.
it's quarter
Yeah.
after.
You had a question.
Well,
Yeah.
you
Go
can,
you go ahead.
Just quickly for point of clarity on the timeline, so
you're saying these revisions, these discussions have been ongoing for approximately a year in the Rules Committee, and now you're going subcommittee by subcommittee to sort of further discuss. That's
We
accurate?
originally sent it out to the department chairs and district chairs to look at it, all right? What we got back said we had a lot of work to do.
Okay,
So we picked this back up in, let's say, August and have worked on it in earnest. We brought it to the Rules Committee, and there was an agreement to bring it out now to each of the committees, because the hope is that we cover most of the people if we're going to committee meetings, but also, like if we're talking about public health and safety, the people in this room understand public health and safety, and so we're not going to a meeting where we have 4 different committees working on it. So there's part of it being the full RTM, the other part is also looking at that particular committee and how they operate.
okay,
And we're going through this procedure because some of the longer-term members of the RTM will recognize that when there's some legislation that comes up, there's one of our members who always stands up and says, "Why are we rushing this?" And so, there are people who want to get it off the table, and they will move on to the noise ordinance and to some other things. So we're not rushing it. We just want to get it done. And so that's why.
I want to get it right, so that you'll
Yeah.
see that there is a
So
little
by the
bit
time,
difference in how we present.
by the
I
time
wanna
it does
get
come to
right.
the floor of the RTM in that evening, whenever that is, to vote on it, everyone has had a chance to weigh in on it and either find those commas that may be there,
Yeah.
or find a better word
Yeah.
in a certain phrase to make it
I just
better.
have two more quick questions. So as a matter of like historical reference, like how often does the RTM go through this process, if ever?
This was originally drafted in 1970s. There were small changes in 1984 and 1996. So it has the incinerator in it, and it has some other archaic phraseology that predated the Freedom of Information legislation by Connecticut.
Okay.
And so a couple times we bounced up against that, and so you'll find a reference in here, so two references to the FOIA. And there we are.
Okay.
We used to call it taking the buggy whips out of the legislation. And there are a lot of buggy whips in other places in the town charter and code, and we've just been gradually nibbling away at them to
Got
get
it,
the
to
more-
modernize, okay.
everybody-
And then my last
Well,
question.
I just want to give an example and then go to
Yeah.
the next one.
Mhm.
So we're also codifying that we follow Robert's Rules of Order. And we're not putting the addition because in our code, we say, someplace in the code, it says we follow the 10th edition, they're up to 13th or 14th. So we're just saying Robert's Rules of Order. So when you're reading this old thing, it always said a meeting with a quorum. Well, according to Robert's Rules, if you don't have a quorum, you don't have a meeting. So we don't need to have those words in there, because by just saying we're following Robert's Rules says,
Yeah, it's redundant.
Yeah,
Got it.
right.
And then the last question is, you mentioned earlier you have 2 more meetings. Is that 2 more committees to
Yeah.
do something like this with? And then we go to the full, okay.
then we
So-
go back to rules.
Then you go back to, okay.
All right, so we missed PZNH, and we missed education. So education canceled because there was nothing on their plan for October, and we just had a conflict that we didn't realize that PZNH was meeting at the same time, or we would have hit them at the same time. So
Okay.
they're gonna have special meetings before October 30th, which is, I believe, our next rules meeting or something like that. So,
Okay.
And then part of it can become cumbersome towards the end game here, because as you know, when something is going to come up before the RTM, it comes to rules 2 weeks before, and then rules recommends that committees meet to make their reports. And we don't know quite well whether rules will say, you gotta meet before this, or whether these meetings will have sufficed. We just have to feeling our way on that topic.
Okay, thank you.
First of all,
But there will be another, you certainly have.
I'm gonna get a question in here somewhere.
Yeah, well,
We're gonna
one
do it all
thing-
night.
and then view of the time, once we do start a little structured walkthrough,
Yeah.
it's gonna provoke some other questions.
Oh, good. So, first of all, thank you to you two guys for doing the heavy lifting on a project that has been on the back burner for a long time, so thank you.
Now comes the other part.
No, this is actually, this is informational. After the election, all new RTM and existing RTM members receive a mailing from the town clerk with a description of the committees and a wish list of which committees you'd like to get appointed to. Are the new descriptions of the committees in this document going to be included in that document?
So, rules has already, the town clerk sends something out to the RTM members in support of the RTM. It's not the town clerk's doing this and deciding. It's one of the many ways that the town clerk supports the RTM. So I know I'm making a slight little nuance and distinction, but it's been decided that we will be sending out the draft ordinance, so everybody has a chance to read it, because we're going to have new members there who did not participate in these committees. With the direct line to my phone, and I do pick up numbers who I don't know, so that if they have any questions, we can cover it from there. They will be setting out what used to be called the matrix. Some people feel that's too sci-fi, but after years in government, I believe government is sci-fi. The new title is going to be the RTM scope, or, you know, how they have these other things, or what you did, yeah, that. Or what the standing committees are supposed to be following, monitoring, and reporting.
Great.
So they'll have that also. Now, there's certain nuances, so you get to like the Board of Selectmen, and everybody should be following, who's on the town side, should be following the Board of Selectmen. Great Island, which wasn't in the original matrix, you know, I don't know who's the primary on that. It matters what they're doing on it. If it's bonding, F&B will be primary to introduce. If it's something on Public Works, it could be Public Works. If there's talking about safety, it's coming to this committee. If it's something on zoning, it's going to PZ&H. So that's just, Great Island's going to be, just follow what's going on there. You know, it's like everybody should be following that. So that's some of the nuances that will be done there. But everybody will be getting that description as opposed to the old ones. But we also think that sending out the scope of the RTM starts to give some description of what's there. And that document will now become the responsibility of the Rules Committee. Jack Davis doesn't have any more time to spend on that. Because I have other things, you know, and it's not my, you know, it's really the committee's responsibility. But ultimately, what I would like is that each of the committees, you know, you have the 5 Mile Commission. What's 1 to 2 sentences that describes what the 5 Mile Commission, River Commission does? I'm not sure. You know, what does the Beautification Commission do? The Commission on Aging, the Youth Commission, all these other things. Just give 1 or 2 sentences so somebody can just look and say, oh, this is what this does. And that's, you know, it's not going to be now. But hopefully by, you know, in the next couple of years, we can generate that. And, you know, Ox Ridge is going to be ending in 6 months, the building committee. So that one goes. So it becomes, as we're going to talk about here, we're getting out of order. But the standing committees are going to be responsible because you're following what's going on in your scope. Oh, this new advisory committee was set up. You know, notify rules so that they can add it to the list. Or there's a couple of committees that were listed on the old website that when I asked Kate about it, Kate goes, I think this has been dormant even before I got here. So, you know, those are the little things that we are, you know, trying to clean up. So.
Can we go?
Sure. Do it.
Okay.
Okay, what we call structured walkthrough.
So
We had a draft of this that did not specify that each district should have a member on each committee. The first draft floated that. We received feedback and realized that, no, that was a good thing. We've got to have each district have someone on each committee, and that's what you'll see here.
You
Next.
also see that when the rules does the assignment of committees, if a committee has 15 people allocated, but they only have 13 members, that the person assigned to a particular committee to make sure that there's one on ever, that person's name may say open, because who's ever coming into that district will be allocated to that committee. And that's been a common practice. One of the things that I'm just going to go through the first part, because there wasn't a lot of changes. They had that the RTM can do commissions. We don't do commissions. We do special committees, ad hoc committees. So whenever you're seeing a special committee that includes ad hoc, that was one of the recent changes. The designation, annual town meeting, we talk about the districts electing people to rules. The moderator chairs the rules committee. They elect a vice chair and a clerk. Prior to the annual meeting, and this used to be, it was kind of really weird, the moderator chaired the committee to solicit names to replace the moderator if somebody wanted to run against the moderator, but they were supposed to recluse themselves in that. And the fact of the matter is that hasn't been done for years. The vice chair of the Rules Committee goes and solicits names, and should the vice chair want to run for that spot, God bless them, there's a succession line, almost like in Congress, that who gets next in line to solicit the names. So that's now updated to how this is run and reasonably specific. I'm on page 2. I'm going to page F. There's different words that people like. So what's the jurisdiction of the RTM? What's the purview of the RTM? We finally came up that a word in between jurisdiction, which sounded very legal, and you know, law-like, and purview, which was a little bit softer, was scope. So scope is what we have there. And so we say that the standing committees are responsible for keeping the list of the various areas within their scope up to date. All right? Which brings us to page 4, and I'm going through this. We took out some stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore, that were like FOIA type stuff. We go to H, where it says the Rules Committee, Standing Committees, and all other RTM committees shall comply with the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act and Robert's Rules of Order.
Board of Ethics is not in there? Is there any reason that it wouldn't be in there?
Board of Ethics is not an RTM committee. It's a standalone board, according to the town
Yeah,
clerk.
yeah.
Okay.
So we have liberated the Board of Ethics from underneath the RTM.
Vote on it, but
Probably
Yeah,
appropriately.
you choose the RTM, Board of Ethics members, but it's its own entity. Thanks for asking.
It is a standalone group. It's very similar in certain ways. I'm going to put it differently. What you might know is the town elects members to a Board of Ed. We approve a budget, total appropriation for the Board of Ed. But the authority from the Board of Ed comes from the state, not the town.
Right.
It's a completely different entity, and that's how we deal with it from a budget perspective, but also with what their roles and responsibilities are. So I kind of look at the Board of Ethics as being in that same.
Just didn't want you to miss it.
So that we get
As
on
a
page
long-serving
4,
member of the ethics.
and the question comes up, Jack, how many committees are there?
Too many.
So,
I have to
there's
count every
7,
time.
and you see them listed there. And when we met with our friends at TGSNA last week, the question came up, is it 7 in stone? Can't there be any other number? So there's a nice little phrase there that says that the Rules Committee can create another committee if they want to, or a subcommittee. But this is an example of the type of improvement that the text has gone through, because it just took someone to say, well, is 7 a magic number? No, it's what we.
Well, just to be
Well-
critical, under E, public health and safety, there's no period, there should be a period.
It's not spelled.
Well, after safety, just put a period there.
Yeah. I'd actually like all the periods
Put it on
gone. But,
That's the
Make
main
it uniform.
yeah, for uniform, one or the other. The
Well,
fact of the
it's-
matter is that this committee used to be 2 committees. And if you go to now everything's done electronic, so you miss some of the things. Used to be a really big cardboard board that had more pinholes in it than you can ever imagine. And everybody used to pin, and districts over here, the committees were over here, and people used to pin names up there and who's serving on each of the committees, to which everybody had to then copy that and everything. We now do that electronically, but you had public safety and public health as 2 separate committees. When they merged, I do not know, but it was before my time here. So it had to be sometime before. And by the way, if you think that I've been around for a long time, in our District 3, Tom outdoes me by years, as does Seth. So, but yeah, so this is just codifying that should the town change its organization and how it structures itself, that committees can be changed by the Rules Committee at its own discretion, but then has to be approved by the full RTM to say, here's our new committees. I don't know in the future we don't have a technology committee. You know, it's just, but not my choice or anything. I'm just saying that things will change.
So that's the standing committees, because we do have a technology subcommittee.
Right.
And there's a pedestrian infrastructure advisory subcommittee to public works, and those do not need rules approval, right? That can just be done by the committees themselves?
Under this new ordinance,
Yeah.
yes. In the past, you required rules approval. Now, that's not to say that all of us didn't violate that. We did.
The technology committee is a subcommittee of the rules committee.
Yeah.
Oh, subcommittee of the rules committee, okay.
But
But what about PIAC, the Pedestrian Infrastructure Advisory Committee?
I think at one time, well, it matters which one, because.
The new one, the one that's been meeting.
Right, but there was one that goes back.
Oh, I know,
a long
but the
time
new
ago.
one
Just
has
to
a-
give some history, because I keep on thinking about the original one that was done maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That did a whole analysis of sidewalks. I know Bert
Right.
von Stupenegger was on it, Terry Duffy was on it, and they did a phenomenal job. It's still the roadmap that we use. And then there was another group that came up, and then they just created a new one that is there. And that's a new committee that Public Works would be looking at. But if
Is
it
it a
Is
subcommittee
that,
of
does
the Public
that
Works?
need approval of the Public Works Committee or the Rules Committee? The creation of the PIAC?
No.
Under existing rules, not these.
Under existing rules, it did.
It does.
Yes.
And it has not received that.
Yep.
Has it received that?
Not
Rules?
that I'm aware
It's
of.
not received. Okay, so does Frank Edelman, who is the chair of this PIAC, know that he is operating outside of the guidelines?
Well, the fact of the matter is that
Extra jurisdiction.
at every meeting,
Sure.
Seth asks if there are other committees that want to report, and that wasn't allowed under the guidelines either. So
You're not answering my question, you're giving me a different
the answer
question.
is that whether or not he knows or not,
Yes?
as soon as this gets passed, he's operating under the guidelines.
But he has been meeting previously without approval,
He's a
and
rogue.
who is to tell him that?
Not me.
The moderator? Whom?
Wouldn't someone on rules be sort of charged with that?
Well,
You're out of
I'm
compliance.
looking at 2 members of rules, 3 members of rules here.
Jim, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we found in here that isn't how we operate.
But you're not answering the question. You're saying, oh, but there's all this other stuff. The specific question is, this was raised by the first select woman at an OPC meeting.
Okay.
PIAC has been created, it is meeting, and she asked Seth, does that need approval of the RTM? And he said no.
It does not need approval of the RTM.
Or does it need approval of rules?
Well, if the answer is under the existing ordinance that we have today, my interpretation, and again, I'm not an attorney, would be yes.
Okay, I'm not opposed to the PIAC concept, but if individuals on various committees can form, and I don't mean this derogatorily, rump subcommittees to go off and do what they're interested in, seemingly under the guise of the RTM, at some point, someone should go, whoa, hold on here just a second.
Well, and we're gonna get to this, all right, because this is
Yeah.
one of the things we're empowering. First of all, any citizen can study anything they want in this town. So if you don't want to say that he's doing it under the guise, he just needs to say, it's not the guise of the RTM, but I'm doing it. One of the things that I had a discussion with one town official who kept on telling me, I'm doing this as a private citizen. I said, you're an elected official. You're no longer a private citizen. And even when we're talking at the Board of Finance, you know, Jim and I will have a conversation, and I will say, because I'm not a private citizen, I'm the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. So what I say, I have to distinguish. The Finance and Budget Committee has not discussed this or voted on it. I'm giving you my perspective. So you almost have to say that, because some people think that if I'm speaking or if somebody else is speaking, that it carries the full weight of the committee. But if we didn't discuss it, it doesn't.
You're absolutely right, and you're very meticulous about doing that, and I think that you deserve all the credit in the world for that. Mr. Edelman is meeting. He's had at least 2 meetings that I know of. They're on TV 79. Go take a look at them. And he is moving forward and presenting himself as an authorized subcommittee of Public Works. Now, if Rules doesn't think this is worthy of addressing,
I mean, we're in the middle of changing something, so yes.
it's not been changed yet.
That's
I
fine.
mean, I'm all about
I'm glad you're bringing
being
it up.
process and
We can take
legality,
it back
that's
to
all.
rules, Jim, and address it,
Great.
okay?
I think it'd be great to deal with that before we have to deal with
That's
this.
fine,
meeting.
it's a
It's not
totally
gonna happen.
separate.
I'm sorry, she just said it was gonna be happening.
We can
and
bring
it's
it
No,
up.
we
not
can
gonna
bring it
happen.
up, but it's not going to happen. You know, it would have to happen at the next rules meeting that it's being addressed. But what we're doing is, and this, one of the things that are being empowered here, it's my understanding, and this is what's going to be empowered here, that this has been discussed at the Public Works Standing Committee. And if the Public Works Standing Committee approves some analysis to be done, it can be done. And if you want to fight me on that, then give back about the $20 million that F&B has saved this town.
Well, no one's fighting.
I
fighting you,
I don't
Jack.
think one has anything to do with the other. I think, if I understand this correctly, I think what we're trying to put a point on is, right, as we revise this and go through this process, it shouldn't negate a retroactive correction if people are out of scope or out of compliance. I think that's how I
Yeah,
was
I didn't know that he
Thank you.
had, I didn't know that he had a subcommittee. I just thought he was doing some preliminary analysis, because I was over there. I didn't know that there was that they had set up a
There's
subcommittee.
been morning
to do it.
meetings. They've been meeting over in the library in the
Okay,
tiny
we'll take
little
it.
writing room.
We'll take care of it, Jim.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
question.
Sure.
So under the changes that you're proposing or working on, a standing committee could create a subcommittee without the RTM approving or the Rules Committee approving.
That's correct.
And would that subcommittee, yeah, okay.
Look, there's a certain amount of reasonableness that you need to have, all right? So, in one of the committees, somebody said, well, you know, you can't bother department heads because they work for the Board of Selectmen. That's not true. Our employees work for the town, and they report to the first selectman and the town administrator. That's who they report to, all right? you can't be absorbing time of town employees who have a job with goals and accomplishments that have been established by who they report to. So, but there's other times which we've happened, and this is some of the things that we've done jointly with the Board of Finance and F&B, which is something I can talk about, is that, you know, if I look at the Board of Finance, everybody there but one has a full-time job. And there's analysis, and we're running a $50 million business with 4 people, and one of them does payroll. So there's some analysis that we do jointly with them, because we have some people that can do the analysis, and we're bringing it back to them, saying, here's what we found, how do you want to proceed? So, like, and I can only say that when we were cleaning up some of the reserve accounts, it's a little funny, the various members who assigned different things, we'd sit down and meet with Jen, and Jen would go, he's our director of finance, and go, well, okay, so where do you want to put this money? And F&B's response to her was, I'm not a municipal accountant. Where do you want this money to go? You tell us. We just said, here's what the history is to it, here's this, we don't think it's needed anymore. We're going to present it back to the Board of Finance. Where it goes, I'm relying on you to tell me where it goes, and then they had to vote on it, and if we were closing down reserve accounts, which we did, then it had to go to the RTM to also get approval, because the money was being transferred from a reserve account into the general fund. So the term reasonable, now that's not to say that over time there hasn't been individuals on the RTM, I'm not going to mention any names, some of it goes back a little bit, some of it is more current, where a chair or a chairman of a board has called a chair and said, can you rein this person in? Or can you now have everything going through the chair of the committee? So that's just the working relationship that you need to be able to have. This isn't to be go off and just bug people, but for analysis purposes. And I think that at the end of the day, we will address it, but I didn't realize that it was a committee. I just thought it was basic analysis.
What page are we on?
Yeah.
4.
Okay.
We're at the bottom of 4?
No, I'm going to the top of 5.
Okay.
That's good.
Basic things that we added, that everything has to comply with state laws, codes, charter, regulations, everything else like that. In other words, the RTM is going to follow the law. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read this better. We talk about the financial responsibilities of the committees, and I know that there was a concern that F&B was going to look as if they're taking on more power by me participating in this. It's actually quite the opposite. F&B is saying, we're secondary on the finances. Your committee is responsible for the finances, the long-term plans, the capital, and the report. And if you've noticed some of the changes that it is, we are responsible for introducing the budget. But we're going to give a high level, and it's up to the committees to give the detail, because that really is your purview, that is your scope, not ours. And you should know it better than us, and in most cases you do.
But that's not really new. I mean, haven't we been doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, we report
In
on
theory, yes.
police, fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, but F&B is often primary, and then the other committees would be secondary. But that's very nice of you to do that.
But yes, but if you
I
notice
appreciate it.
change in the reports, we're just
Yeah.
doing an introduction, a very high level, and we're not getting into the detail. And if I look back over
like I missed
time,
it.
including myself and my prior members, and we've had some very good chairs with Bruce Orr and Jim Paling, we get into the detail. Well, we don't need to get into the detail. That's what the committees are. We can give a high level, here's what the thing is, and then that's why the other committees are reporting. Otherwise, you're hearing the same report over and over again, which is just, makes the meeting longer and boring. So that's what part of it's changing. It turned out that F&B was the only committee that had a liaison here. So F&B is the liaison to the Board of Finance. That was written, that makes a lot of sense. But isn't education the liaison to the Board of Education? And if we went through every committee, there were commissions or other things, so PZ&H is land use. You guys, because you cover such a broad range of things, you have public health, you have the public safety, and then there was another one in here. And emergency management, all right? Because you've covered a wide range. Now, what the specific committees are in the departments, that's in the scope of the standing committees. So, so Park and Rec is with Park and Rec Commission, but you're also but we have to give some definition here. It's easy to say that the Education Committee is just the liaison with the Board of Ed and responsible for following, monitoring, and reporting all related educational matters. But in the town, one has to give some clarity of who's responsible for what. So Public Works is responsible for facilities, but not the Board of Ed facilities and not the Park and Rec facilities. So this provides some of that clarity that existed before, and we took out the incinerator. So this is it for public health and safety. The new wording is, and this was reviewed with Mac and Lois, is liaison with the relevant public safety, health, social services, and emergency management boards, commissions, committees, and departments, and responsible for following, monitoring, and reporting on all related matters, as well as other areas defined.
It's not called social services anymore, it's human services.
Oh, good, yeah.
Done.
Thank you.
That's Ally Ramstek's
Yes, it is.
body, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
TGS&A,
Can we just stop and just make sure, because this is, that of all this stuff that we're all important, we're the only ones that are looking at this paragraph. So if anyone has any
Yeah.
concerns on this paragraph,
Well,
speak
so-
now if Rev, hold your peace.
Well, I have a question, just in general, how it works, since I seem ignorant, but, so there's a police commission.
yep.
Right.
We didn't appoint the police commission? This
Appointed by
board?
the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, but
3 members.
doesn't this sort of
2-year
suggest
term.
that if there's a police commission, it would have derived through this standing?
No.
I don't
It
think
says
so.
No?
liaison. It
Okay.
says liaison.
Okay. liaison.
And, yeah,
And we do liaison with the.
So we liaison with the police commission, for example, that's appointed by the first selectman.
that's correct.
And the police department.
Yes, and they will also say they're an independent commission while they are appointed
Okay.
by, because it's not an elected thing like a planning and zoning
Okay.
commission, but they operate independently.
Got it, thank you.
So the police department actually, Darien has one of the earliest civilian-controlled police departments in the state. So the police department responds to the police commission, not the Board of Selectmen, as much as, they control the budget, but the police commission sets policy and guidance for what the police department should be doing.
And the police commission is appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
That's right. And is very independent of the Board of Selectmen once appointed, yeah. I think it's 2-year terms and there's 3 members.
And you should watch those meetings if you're interested. 'cause
I
they
am.
are really-
Fascinating, must-see TV.
I mean, not a lot of them, but
Yeah.
just 1 or 2
Oh,
to get
sure.
a sense
Yeah.
on how it works.
Yeah.
And when we talked about the budget, because the first time I got involved with the
Yeah.
police budget, Mac did it, that that was the police commission that we were talking to, as well as the police department.
But they don't, the different commissions operate differently. Certain people are given a budget. So like the beautification, they may request from the town administrator, we want $15,000 to do a lot of the good work that they do around town. The town administrator with the first selectman decides what's going to be allocated there. All right, so they may request 15,000, and here's the projects we're gonna do, but they may only be getting 10. So in that particular case, they don't really control their budget as much as they're given their budget based upon a conversation. Some of the commissions actually create the budget with the department heads. Park and Rec does that. Now, they're also appointed by the Board of Selectmen. But they really work very closely with the Park and Rec department to create that budget. And frequently, when we're having budget discussions on capital and other things like that, town administrator, Board of Selectmen, Budget and Finance, Park and Rec Committee, and F&B, we are talking to the commission as much as we're talking to Pam.
Okay, well, that's sensible, right, because they generate revenue also, right? So
Yeah.
maybe beautification doesn't necessarily do that.
Well, I'm
No.
the one who told Pam at one time, I know they're telling you on your expenses to cap it at 2%, but if you can generate 3% of revenue off that 2%, go out and prosper. And quite honestly, we had to move their money into a special revenue fund because they've come up with so many different programs that they are a major revenue source on just the programs. I'm not talking about the beaches and other things like that. So yes, they've done an excellent job.
Yeah, I think the PH&S paragraph V is in, or, yeah, small v. Looks good, it's very comprehensive.
Well, as a theme in this that's been going on for the year, it's sort of like asking the rabbit to carry the lettuce. Because you've asked the committee of people on the RTM and on committees to describe what the committees will be doing. Now, first crack at this, we tried to enumerate everything, and then it wasn't working. We wound up with incinerators. So by creating a scope list, which includes a broad swipe, 103 items, you actually are, you will find throughout this thing that the committees are being empowered in comparison to what they had before.
Good.
But and we also want engagement, and I think that's very important. You know, especially in this committee where you guys are so broad in what you're covering. But when you look at that list, and different committees are set up differently, Park and Public Works, pardon me, Public Works, my youngest boy, usually I pick up on, but this time I'm not. If you look at the Public Works Committee, they also cover a broad range of things. So somebody works on the sewer, somebody else is working on flooding, somebody else is working on the transfer station and sustainability committee. And they report on what's going on during their committee meetings on the various areas. So that's how one is set up. We sort of do that in F&B because the people that we created, and we'll go back a little bit on the buddy system, what it used to be called, are following those committees throughout the year. So the people that are assigned to Park and Rec are at the commission meetings, they're working with the RTM Park and Rec Committee. And so that's one of the things that we actually found in here, and I'll get to it, that we're continuing, but we came back to it in an interesting way through the buddy system.
I just have a quick question, and I don't mean to go backwards or anything, but as I think about relevant committees and being liaisons and budgeting and maybe recommending appropriations and such, like even under your finance and budget, like I don't even see the word appropriation anywhere. I'm just curious if that has been under discussion as far as like we as subcommittees or standing committees in our instance, we'll approve, let's say, a fire truck appropriation and then recommend that up to the full RTM. Like, has there been discussion about incorporating language like that in the relevant committees that do have a hand in pushing forward appropriations in that manner?
I think we tried to cover that in another area, but I'm going to go back and make sure that evaluating appropriations is in that section.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's a valid point. So,
If we're describing like what we do, that is
No,
a big major part of what we do.
part of what we did also, and I just have to reread it to see if it's not
Yeah.
already in here. But part of what we did is that when we were looking at some of the other committees that were going on, we realized it was like listening to something where we all were reporting on the same resolution and you heard the same numbers.
Sure.
So we extracted some of the things that all committees do and moved it to the front part of it, the preamble, if you so to say, of the description of the committees.
Okay.
So some of the financial things, such as looking at budgets, looking at long-term and capital plans and long-term, long-range plans, are in that preamble. But I don't know if we put appropriations in there. So I think it's...
No, just a suggestion to think
No,
about.
it's not even a suggestion. If we didn't, it's going to be in there. That's how quickly we've been adding things to this.
Jack, can I ask another budget question? I'm sorry, do you?
No, go ahead.
Another budget question, and let's use PH&S as an example. The health department is looking at, they've already hired another full-time sanitarian
Yeah.
because they've got all these new restaurants that are opening up, et cetera, et cetera. The director of the health department met with us when we were reviewing the budget and said, I'm putting in for 2 FTEs or 1.5 FTEs. And we said, well, you make a very strong argument. I mean, it sounds like the workload is going through the roof and you're gonna need the personnel. I think maybe I'm thinking about last year's budget, but he didn't get what he wanted when it came time for the budget to finally, be appropriated. So we can't really tell the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen how to write their budget. All we can really do is give them feedback from our review and our following monitoring and reporting, what we think is appropriate for that department. But still, these guys' responsibility,
To a
right?
certain extent, okay? I'm sorry, when you were talking about that with the sanatorium, which I knew the conversation was going on between the health department, Kate and Monica, it always reminds me of the song, you can't always get what you want, but you definitely get what you need. The fact of the matter is, and I always mess up the letters to this, maybe 10, I'm going to ask Lois because she'll remember when it was there. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, Darien was one of the last communities to set up an LBI. Did I get the?
SRBI?
Yes, SRBI, whatever. And the concept of that is that it wasn't for special ed, but it's trying to catch kids earlier than the discrepancy model, where we were waiting to 5th grade for a kid to fail. We could actually, there were enough tests that you could understand that the child was going down that path. So if you could catch a child early enough and provide the tools, basically you were able to, number one, better educate the child, which is always the first goal. But number two, you avoided having emotional things that were also attached to the fact that the child might have been struggling reading or other things like that. So it was going before the Board of Finance, and Murray Stagelman happened to be the chair of the Board of Finance at the time. And Bruce Orr was the chair of F&B, I was vice chair of education. And I went to the Board of Finance and said, don't cut this from the budget, and explain the reasons why and what the future cost savings are. So there are other things that we could do. The first year that I became chair, It also happened to be the first year that Jay-Z became chair of the Board of Finance and Kate took over for town administrator. Governor Malloy decided that what I used to call the Gang of 20, and this isn't political, I'm just reporting things, 20 towns were going to lose all their state funding, all right? The Board of Finance voted on their budget. Well, they don't get to go back and change their budget when all of a sudden the state decided, oh no, we are getting $500,000 or all of the funding or most of the funding that they had taken away back. F&B had a problem with it, several members on F&B, which was a wonderful way to go in and say, Jack, by the way, you got to go do this. And we talked, and what F&B did was change the mill rate. So we lowered the mill rate, and by lowering the mill rate, it accounted for revenue that the town was going to receive, but wasn't in their original budget. So there are things that we can do within the RTM to monitor certain things. Now, on the Board of Ed, somebody one time said, well, we could give the Board of Ed more money. No, we're giving them an appropriation. And I was one time quoted as saying if the Board of Ed, this is when their budget was 50 million, so it was many years ago. I said if the Board of Ed wants to buy $50 million worth of crayons, they can. They'd all end up in jail, mind you. But the fact of the matter, how they control that budget, what we're seeing is really placeholders for line items. We don't have control over the line items. Town side, we do. So
It's good, let's move on.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Again, we're talking about that you need working relationships. I'm going to go to Part 4, Section 4. Big change. And Mac and I, was it 2 years ago or so, or last year, that we presented a fire engine at the first meeting of the RTM, and we were reporting on what the prior committee had said. So I was speaking with Kate, and Kate said, no, that prior committee is still in existence. All committee members that are still on the RTM are on that committee until their successor is named. So we're still that committee when we report up until the time when everybody goes to rules and everybody's assigned to committees and that. So that's one of the changes we have here. And that said, so
And where is that? What page you on?
Bottom of page 8.
Bottom of page 8.
Okay.
It says that the members of standing committees shall serve until their successors are designated by the Rules Committee. And then we went to it at the Rules Committee organization meeting. We wanted to be very specific because nobody can be removed or switch committees during the course of the year. So this says that until your successor is named, you're still serving on this committee. And this committee is still in existence until the new committee is organized when we all go out and hire chairs, vice chairs, and clerks.
Where does it say that a member of the RTM cannot change committees mid-year?
It doesn't. The question is, should we put that in? Because it does add some confusion, and that has been the practice for a long time. Other people have more knowledge on it than I do on the language.
Well, I think you probably want to have that in there, but maybe put some type of control. Maybe the Rules Committee would have to approve it, so that there's a control behind it.
Well, the Rules Committee would, because the Rules Committee does the assignment, that's in here. But whether or not they,
So if somebody wanted to switch from one committee to another committee,
the custom has been no, but it's not written anyplace, you're right, Jim.
No, we're not, and I know that was one of the open items that we remained silent on.
What's the thinking behind not allowing that?
First of all, we're only serving a year. I actually wanted to do something in the opposite and got told immediately, there's no way we're doing that, which is when you're on a committee, you serve your term on that committee.
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier for everyone. And then if you want to go to a different committee, your next term, you can go to the different committee. But
Some of us felt that was unfair.
yeah, I was summarily shot on that one. And that's being blunt.
No, and because, it was because that if somebody, you know, you're put on Committee A, and you really wanted to be on education, and now you're on Committee A for 2 years, and somebody else comes in the next year, and they just get put on education, and that's why we didn't do that.
And I agree.
Somewhat related, are there caps for each of the
I thought it's
subcommittees
by
anywhere?
seniority, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, that was gonna be my question,
It's by
yeah.
seniority. I thought the longer you were serving on.
I thought
the
rules
RTM,
had to err on the side of seniority in creating or choosing the people to be on various committees.
Rules does
There are no
not
rules.
choose it. The district rules members assign, propose rather, to the committees to which the members in their district will serve.
Right.
They do, when they're looking at certain things, look at, well, Tom, you moved around. But, for the longest time, Tom was on a committee, and if he was, an officer of that committee or had previously served for like 5 years or so on it, then that gave him seniority over somebody brand new if he wanted to return to that committee.
No, it's the seniority of the
Seniority.
membership in the RTM.
Yes. Well, that
That's what I've always
That, it may not be written there,
It's not
but
codified.
that's been practiced
There's-
for 28 years that
There's
I
nothing
know of.
codified on this.
Well, there you
As
go.
you see
So
along
Kemp
with
and
that.
I have 20-plus years on the RTM. And shouldn't
Look
we,
what it's come to.
heavy lifting like this, shouldn't people who have been on the RTM longer move earlier in the decision, or
Have priority.
have priority over some newbie that comes in right out of the box and doesn't even understand how the town works?
That's up
I
to the
would
district.
agree in that situation, but you shouldn't have priority in your district over somebody else who's been serving on a committee who may not have the same number of total years as you have, but have been serving on that committee, attending the meetings, and even possibly an officer of that.
Well, it sounds
that
like you
committee.
need to do some work on that section because.
Yeah.
Well,
I would agree with
it's
that.
also
It's
somewhat
not
of a
in here at all.
swamp. Jack probably remembers that, as a matter of fact,
Like, could you get
the House of
bumped?
Representatives hasn't got this thing worked out either in Washington.
No, we're not, all right.
So, but we did some work on term limits, which has to do with these seniority that you're asking about, and that just didn't go anywhere.
No, this isn't term limits.
It's related.
This is,
It's
no, it's
related.
not. This is
And it has to do with the
seniority.
degree of
of
granular
appointment to committees,
detail
yeah.
that we need to put in this.
But if it's not in anything in writing, I mean, it's just one of these anecdotal traditions, so it doesn't really exist.
Well, it does. There's
Where?
another-
Where?
I'll show you that section
Okay.
eventually. But I will also say, for those who are newer to this, at certain times, and it's sometimes based upon what's going on in town, certain committees become red hot. So, like, PZ&H was very hot when everybody wanted lights on the stadium field. F&B used to have the reputation that you couldn't get on it, but now we've had turnover as people have gone elsewhere. So committees change as things in the town change. So, I'm on the RTM because I really want, I don't like what's going on in the Board of Ed, so they really want to be on the Education Committee. So that's one of the things that does occur. But where it's really answered is somewhat on the top of page 9. And it really should say rules also. But each standing committee may, subject to the approval of the Rules Committee, adopt its own rules of procedure not consistent with these rules of procedure. So as I said, how F&B operates may be different than how public health and safety operates on some of the things and how we do it and how we've put things out. But we've always gotten new members, and we have some older members, some of which actually end up on other boards. So that's part of the turnover. But yes, we will address that.
Yeah, and
But
seems reasonable.
I'm not sure, we have to think about how. Because sometimes, I don't want to say that seniority is a driving force, because I don't want to take people off of a committee who've been working on that committee just because, you know, if Jack Davis decided, I've been here for, I think, 20 years, I'm not even sure, but maybe it's less. But if I all of a sudden say, well, I take priority because I want to be in PZ&H, and that shouldn't occur because there's other members who have been operating in that committee and have much better knowledge than I
I think
would
the
have.
Rules Committee, when you were putting that together, would give consideration to someone based on their years on the RTM, but it's not written in stone.
Right.
Because there has been situations where they did not put more senior RTM member on a committee because someone with lesser years had a special knowledge of something, and so they trumped it, which is fine.
A special attorney or something.
Yeah,
Well,
something-
there's been places where we've had, go the other way, that people were taken off, but when you look at somebody's background, they're a land use attorney, and they want to be on PZ&H, and you know what? The town benefits from that person
Exactly.
being there.
Exactly. So, I
exactly.
mean, you can wordsmith that in. to
Yeah, we'll have to
cover the
figure it out.
situation.
That's one of, the reason why it wasn't in there is because it's one of the more difficult things to wordsmith.
Yeah.
But we will come back with what our suggestions.
That's why you're making the big bucks, Jack.
Yeah, and
Taking
this year-
on
and this year
tough
I got
issues.
a 20% raise, and it still doesn't buy me a cup of coffee.
Thanks for raising that.
So one of the things that we did say is that each committee can operate under their own basic guidelines. Let's see. So here's one of the things that we did. They got away from it. But at one time, it required members of F&B to be assigned to the standing committee solely for a liaison on financial matters. So there was a major dispute between F&B, I wasn't chair, and the Board of Finance. And Jay-Z and I got together to figure out how to make this work. And that's how the buddy system came about, which was, in most cases, we should be working together anyway. And the goal is that 10 minutes after the Board of Finance is done with their budget review, F&B could vote on the budget. So, because the ideas have exchanged. And that's been expanded to include members of the other committees, so that MAC acts as the liaison on the police and the public safety in conjunction with members of the Board of Finance and the F&B committee to look at the overall budget, raise similar questions, have discussions, and that group of Board of Finance members then report back to the Board of Finance on what the collective thought process was. So that's going to stay, because effectively that's what we've been doing with the buddy system. And if we work collaboratively between the various committees and the Board of Finance, and in fact also the departments, then that comes out with a good solution that allows the committees to report on it and everybody to be satisfied with the budgets that are there, and allows that quick approval of budgets, which we've been able to do. We had something else here. Originally, it was the moderator may attend any meeting. Well, basically, anybody can attend any meeting. We're a little more specific, that the moderator may attend any executive session of any RTM meeting, so that there's not a debate, well, saying, well, you're not part of PZ&H, you know, I don't know that you can be in here. But the answer is the moderator can. And we will question when would a RTM have executive session? Somebody asked that question. I said, I have 2 words, Great Island. So there were executive sessions on Great Island. Some of us attended more than one meeting, and we were allowed to go into that meeting's executive session. Of course, that was Monica also saying that's fine, but the moderator should be allowed to attend any of those. It's, as I said, Seth would go and say, is there any other committee that wants to report on this? Well, that was one of the things that really wasn't allowed. If you weren't assigned by rules, you weren't supposed to be reporting on it. And we've had several instances where committees have. And that's within their right. So we just codified that.
And where is that?
Page 9, section 6.
So it's page 10 in the middle,
Oh, I
the
may
middle
be-
paragraph on page 10.
Top of that.
Yeah, and, well, it's in both things. But any committee on its own motion consider and report to the RTM upon any matter not referred to it, but within their scope of such committee. If there's questions or disputes concerning the scope of any standing committee, that should be decided by the Rules Committee. So that's basically saying, you know, there's been certain things that Public Works wanted to report on. And there's certain times where F&B, like on your noise ordinance, even though there may be fines and other things. And somebody said, does F&B want to be on that? And our response was, no.
Great.
So,
Can I just tease that last sentence out a little bit? So like,
Sure.
in terms of functionality, how would that be decided by the Rules Committee? Like, you would get a report, or you'd watch, let's say we have a dysfunction here, our chair would come to you as a matter of business to put it on your agenda, or would there be a joint special meeting to unpack something like that scenario? I don't know, I'm just tossing
You
out,
know what? My response to that is, I don't know either.
yeah.
But should it, first of all, I sort of say this really isn't a big town. If we can't, between committees, talk and say, work this out, we got a bigger problem than just the dysfunction.
Sure.
So it's, if somebody says, well, I want to, you know, I'm going to pick on Public Works, but if Public Works now wants to make comments on the Board of Ed property, then we're going to say no. But I will tell you, when the town bought the property that was next on Holmes, it was the RTM that raised that building, that home, had to be razed, it had to be destroyed before it was handed over to the Board of Ed, because members of the RTM didn't want the Board of Ed to take that property and use it for something else. Now, having been working with the chair, so that's something that was done, and quite honestly, it came out of PZ&H, which wouldn't typically be their purview, the person who raised it. And quite honestly, the Board of Ed was tickled pink that we asked for that building to be taken down, because it meant they were going to take it down. It didn't come out of their budget, it came out of the town. So, you know, that just shows that, but that's it. So I don't know how, but it would be up to rules if there was a question on that. And the members of rules or this moderator would have to say, go from there. One of the other things that changed, which we didn't quite cover, is that it used to say that the moderator assigned committees. And that's not. It's rules assign committees, but the moderator can assign, in the absence of rules, special meeting, emergency, they can assign committees. But it's really rules that assign who's responsible for reporting and what's the priority. This is trying, the very scope in that is trying to help it. The last one, we're not going to get into too much, but we can disagree on this, so I'm not going to get into draft versus approved minutes.
What we found out in the
Well,
last,
I'm not, no, don't even get there, because it's not appropriate. We
It's
have
been
to
interesting.
send our minutes to the moderator, and we also send it to the town clerk so it can be recorded, all right? So it's saying, which we already do, when we're noticing a meeting, we send it to the moderator and the town clerk, who does the notice, puts it on the board for us on the town website. frequently, we just say, can you just send it, and for me, we just say, can you send it to the usual suspects? But the town clerk doesn't send things to the chair of the Board of Ed or the superintendent of schools unless you request it. So, you know, if there's something education we're talking about, I have to ask the town clerk to also include them on the distribution. But also then minutes that are sent to the town clerk for being then also needs to be sent to the moderator so the moderator can see what's going on. If you noticed around town, and I think it started at the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, minutes have gotten shorter and shorter, which makes sense. What we actually do is shorten the minutes on F&B and include the link to the meeting.
The Vimeo, yay.
And the timestamps.
And the timestamp.
Well, we're not that good.
Oh, stay tuned. There's a new
But
sheriff
yes.
in town.
But no, we do that so that you don't need to have the clerk write, John Jones said this, Mary said this, and
Yeah.
other things like that. We discussed this, all right? If you want to see what the discussion is, here's the link.
But you're, back in May, I mean, what you did was great. Instead of a list like this of talking about the budget, you just,
So how long do you keep the links? How
Yeah.
long?
Every meeting that's been recorded since 2012 is still on Vimeo. And the ones before that are on DVDs in the basement of the library,
Oh, so
if you
it's
really want to go look.
actually archived for a
It's
while.
archived, yes, and it's never going away.
There are times when we need to go way back.
You can go back and find meetings from, I've been getting requests from people going, I'm looking for a such and such committee meeting from 2011. Okay, there it is, boom.
Nice.
Really?
Good.
So,
Actually, it's funny that you said that. When we were cleaning up the reserve accounts, I went back into minutes that were there.
yeah.
And the reserve was set up by Jay-Z when he was vice chair, because Liz Mao wasn't there. And I reported on it to the RTM because I think that Bruce wasn't there. So I was given to do the report on that, on the other side of it. And then the two of us were meeting, and I said, we're undoing this now. We set it up together, we're taking it out together, the money's moving away. So yes, archives are very important, and some of us are concerned that on the new website as it exists today,
no, yeah.
Good luck finding anything.
No, the past minutes aren't there.
past
I know.
minutes aren't there, past agendas aren't there.
Yeah.
And we use it to reference, especially if HHR, assuming that we may have to come up with more money for it, I have to go back and reference, well, we first voted it in April over here, we then did a revision in June over here, and now we're revising and amending those two resolutions for additional minutes. Well, I need to go back into the website to save that. I have enough paper in my house that I'm
Yeah.
told to get rid of.
That might just be taking time. I have no idea. but-
I'm hopeful. I am
Yeah.
requesting
Can I-
because there's things going on.
Yeah, just as it pertains to like these revisions and discussion, and I don't mean to like round it out, but before we move on, if we're about to, which it feels like we might be,
Yes.
I would just ask for consideration. I see the triad of these like great words, which, follow, monitor, those are sort of more like reactive, right? And report, which is sort of more proactive. I would sort of in the outcropping of the discussion about maybe appropriations recommendations, like maybe consider adding a fourth word of like recommending, right? Like, because if we're authoritatively reviewing and monitoring and studying and, right? It
Done.
seems to me like we would follow
Done,
too.
done,
Yeah.
done.
I
That's
like
where it's
that.
added.
I think that's good.
Report and recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, no, this is exactly how this is. When somebody comes up with a good idea, I don't need further discussion. I think it's an appropriate idea, it's
Okay.
added. Done.
You're in charge. All right, thank you.
So Jack, this one's dated like today. We'll see in the next one when you work it up again?
We will make some, I can't promise that we're gonna do that rewrite of that in a short period of time.
I'm not suggesting we meet again, but I'm just saying we'll.
You're going to see a new one.
Absolutely.
When we have it all done from rules, everybody's gonna get a copy of where we are. We'll get out the red line or blue line thing to you, whatever it is. Being an old accountant, I don't like seeing red in documents because it has a connotation. We weren't allowed to, in public accounting, the Big Eight, we weren't never allowed to
Blue or
wear a
black.
red tie.
Yeah, well,
You know, seriously, you weren't allowed to. And I had some really nice ones. But we'll get this out. We have a meeting on Thursday, so some of the initial recommendations that you have here will be added to that. So, because it happens that quickly.
I think that what we're gonna see is when it goes to the RTM, we will see a final version.
But of course,
You're gonna see it before.
Yeah.
and
Thank you, I like
It'll be-
commenting.
formatted more steady. There's a limit to what we can do in word processing. You gotta know how to indent.
I like the big font, but we don't need, to kill trees to pass this out, I hope.
We brought them tonight as a favor
Thank
to
you.
you.
That's very
It's helpful to
So
work with it.
that
Thank you.
we know
Yes.
that everybody at home may not have printed out their own copy.
that was kind of you guys. So we should estimate getting this all wrapped up before the end of the year, like, or November or December, when
The end of October, we should
End of
have the
October.
final draft.
but in terms of coming in front of the full RTM, you
November.
expect that November, okay, got it.
We're hopeful for November, all right? But as, you'll hear a little bit of difference. We want it in November because, for the most part, it's gone through each of the committees, and there's an overall consensus that, yeah, there may be little snippets here, but for the most part, this is how we want to run the organization.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And,
At the election.
but if we have to move it to December, we would. So, again, I'm more interested, now you're never gonna get everything perfect, we're not gonna meet everybody's needs, so I'm not gonna make that commitment to you because it's not gonna happen. But we will try to accommodate as many as we can so that it's a collective thought.
No, this is great, thank you for your work
Yeah.
on this.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you,
This is
Jack.
great,
Here,
thank
here.
you.
Thank you for both your comments, I think they were
Yeah.
very
Oh,
good.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next topic we're going to talk about tonight is discuss and explore the beginnings of an adoption of the noise ordinance for the town of Darien.
May I join you for that meeting?
Yeah, absolutely, because your committee's involved in it well.
Thank you.
And you'll notice F&B will quickly move back.
So the best I can tell is the selectmen started this earlier in the summer. They met and they discussed it, and the first kind of go-around, they didn't seem to have a real appetite for doing anything. Then they had a second meeting about it, and that's when they kind of keyed onto not going through an overall thing like some communities done, tried banning equipment from being used. So I think what they're really keen on is having a timing of when work can be done. And we're lead on this, we're being charged with coming up with it. We'll be working with town council, we'll be working with TGS&A. Is that a good synopsis?
Right.
Okay.
It's going to be, I think what we can look forward to is a bunch of joint meetings, because the TGSA shouldn't wander off in this direction. The division of labor may be something like this. The public is going to have a lot of opinions on this, and the best way to deal with that is to have a public hearing. We don't have to have a public hearing because you only have to have that if you're changing the town charter. We are writing an ordinance, so we don't need it. But it would make good sense, just as we did on the bag ordinance, to have,
And that was
and the
really
blight.
was helpful.
So blight was not a charter, but we had public hearing, so people could express themselves, and we all will benefit from that. We also have to have a discussion with the chief of police concerning enforcement. Big topic. We need to talk to public health, we need to talk to the contractors of the waste removal. We need to talk to the Board of Education because they're the the contractors of the contractor.
Right.
What's the word am I looking for?
Well, right now-
The contractor and the vendors. So that there is going to be a lot of stuff that the committees will share. What we're preparing right now is a review of other towns' ordinances. Some are very lax, some of them have to do with decibel counts.
Well, the state doesn't have an overall code on this topic. They defer to every town, which is fine. And what they have done is, and I'll send it to everybody, they have a list alphabetically by towns in the state of their ordinance, and they're all over the place. They're some were created 40 years ago. So it's, but it really is interesting.
No tractors on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
This is ours from that website, if anyone wants to pass around and read it. It was put out in 95. Like, not to interrupt, but.
No,
So
it's-
Frank,
yeah.
you're suggesting that we do a kind of a informational, let's listen to what the public and the major stakeholders in this, contractors, garbage people, leaf blower people, et cetera, see what their thoughts and concerns are before we start trying to even draft a regulation.
It may go, let me hum the tune a different way. We may draft a skeleton legislation
Straw man.
with blanks in it.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the benefit of the public hearing and good judgment and recommendation to the RTM, because the RTM still has to pass this. Fill in those blanks. There we are. 'Cause, the feeling being that if we just have a hearing and sit there and listen to everybody and then have to get to work. Do some, TGS&A will do work prior to that, to have something on on our table in the joint meetings, to see if we've got it right.
Well, it'd also be helpful to the public to kind of see where we are. rather than
That'll
just-
structure that meeting a little bit.
I definitely think we should do some outreach to the lawn people, to the garbage company people,
Yeah.
et cetera, because we need to hear what it's gonna do to them.
Absolutely.
And why they have to collect garbage at 5:30 in the morning, and where are they collecting garbage at 5:30 in the morning? And do they do it because Darien doesn't have a regulation or a limitation, and they wait to go to the other towns that have one later in the morning, et
We also
cetera?
want to cover our bases, because if we have a public hearing and they don't come to the hearing, well, then they'll feel shut out. If we actually go to the contractors and conduct some informational interviews,
Yeah,
then we'll all benefit from that to find out what their issues are and try to address them in our legislation.
Yeah, because we
So
want to find out
it's a certain amount of work.
if we tell them that, okay, you can't do any of this work before 8 or 9 in the morning, we want to find out why that's a problem.
Now,
right.
to address the question that we're catching right now is, where are we today and what are we doing now? Because the article was in the newspaper in August.
And some of my concern about the time restriction, for example, the other day, they had 2 leaf blowers going and a big, lawn mower, and we're in just a very small piece of property, like 0.25 acres. So you've got this really large number of people working on a very small piece of land, and so.
We're gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
I
have
think
that.
talking to the lawn company is really gonna be important, reaching out to them.
Well, at least they did it fast, if they had that many people on a small piece of
Well,
land.
that-
Yeah,
that's
but
true.
you
I
have
agree
to
with
leave-
this, and I would just
you have
interject
to
to
leave the
say,
house.
I've watched other towns go through this public hearing sort of setup, and it took hours and hours,
that's
and
why-
it was
well,
contentious.
But you know what?
Yeah.
We're up
Dual
for it.
track approach,
Yeah.
I think, makes a lot of good sense.
We're up for it. In other words, and our role is to sort of, I don't call it abuse, not abuse, input. Our role is to take that input and just let the good times roll.
Yeah.
When we did
Can I
ag
ask-
ordinance, we had a 3-minute suggestion, and nobody bumped, I think maybe out of the 40 people who testified, I think 3 or 4 kind of bumped up against it, but usually a person says what they
Yeah,
have to
I'm
say.
not discouraging public discourse or input, I'm just stating the reality that, putting some reasonable controls around that process would make a lot of sense in terms
Yeah.
of
Absolutely.
having it be productive.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Where did this come from, this existing ordinance?
That came from DEEP's website. If you search
DEEP.
Connecticut State Noise Ordinance,
Okay.
it points you to every town. It's listed PDF format, town by town, as Mac
Yeah.
described.
Like,
And that
Is
one,
this Darien?
that's Darien.
It references state regulations on noise and noise prohibited. I thought you said there were none.
No, I said if
They're
they.
very general.
The state
It's
does
very general.
decibels, right?
They don't give
defer.
us a hat we can hang,
Right.
a hook that we can hang our hat on.
The state does have a very comprehensive, multi-tiered overlay that we have been adhering to per the current policy. And so I would just sort of on the face of it argue, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But clearly, as Monica stated, some people have some issues, so.
Well, I think,
Part of it is like in Blight, the state, we all rushed to see if they get the definition of the state. Well, what the state actually said was, we authorize you to make up your own regulations. And so there's an element of that. And there was I just found out about today, there was a regulation that the DEEP needed to review and approve any legislation that we came up with. That expired during the summer, so we don't have to do that. Unofficial.
So
well,
when
I
I
think
just
things
read
have-
this here,
Right.
they said that the police would enforce it, but there's somewhat bit of a problem when it comes to decibel level, because that means you're gonna have to get a special meter to measure that for
my
enforcement, so, for the decibels?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
the
okay,
question
so,
is it accurate?
Yeah.
You know, right, there was some, that's the.
Well, the larger question is, does the police department want to go running around enforcing noise regulations?
That's why-
when they have trouble enforcing traffic
Yeah.
regulations?
I hope
Yeah.
that you go with us that day when we
I will be
interview
there.
Anderson.
Yeah, that's a
With a
concern of
camera.
mine, to be honest. That's a concern. Do they have the bandwidth or the
Yeah.
availability to really properly enforce whatever we're gonna opt to at the end of it put forward?
I had a conversation with a landscaper. He gave me some kind of interesting insight. It was kind of humorous. He said that historically, he never met his customers. He'd come to their
Bless
house.
you.
God bless you.
He'd come to their house during the day, you know, he'd do his work and then he'd bill them and then he'd get paid. Come COVID, everybody's working at home. He goes to someone's house at 2 in the afternoon, they come running out. I'm on a Zoom call, can you come back in an hour?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so the world's kind of changed as far as
Yeah.
people's attitudes
Yeah.
towards noise
Yeah.
during the day.
Yeah, I also, sorry, one more thing I just wanted loosely as we're like broad strokes.
Yeah.
When I think about a noise ordinance, I know we've had some articles floating around and my mind does also, because I've been watching these other town meetings go to like leaf blowers and lawnmowers. But like, really, if we're gonna have this discussion, it's not just about that, right? It's going to be about what happens when your neighbor has a party, what happens when, you know, the Memorial Day parade flyover is too loud, or, right? So we need to think about the global.
We may choose to bite off as much as we want to. Our charge from the Board of Selectmen is landscaping and garbage contractors. So to the extent that, based on our fact finding, we want to enlarge our responsibilities, we will, but we don't have to.
Understand,
And when you
I'm,
go beyond that perimeter, you have complications.
yeah, no, of course, I think we're saying the
The police
same
have a way
thing.
of dealing
Yeah.
with parties now, been working. Construction is, so we had landscaping and garbage haulers. Now you want to add in construction, it may do that.
Not much of that
And
going
when
on
you go
around here.
beyond that, because
Yeah,
if you have a house.
Somewhat of a slippery slope.
It is a
Yeah.
slippery
Noise
slope.
is noise.
Yeah.
So-
Right, but.
Well,
these
like,
are-
for
these are
example, the
terms-
Greenwich, you know, then it's, oh, well, the gas blowers are louder and bad for the environment, and, like, it's, I
We're
don't know,
gonna
I
have
think
to-
there's some creep.
It's going to be an enjoyable couple of months as we sort this
Yeah.
out.
Couple of months,
Definitely. So we have people asking us now, what's happening with the noise ordinance? The answer is that we're doing some basic research, that we have a little complication with our committees. And I said to TGS&A last week, when we had the counterpart of this meeting, was that we don't know who will be on this committee next year, because we haven't had an election. Further, we haven't had assignments to people from the district chairs. We have this discussion here about what the rules do versus a district chair makes the assignment, or the district caucus has assigns people out to the different committees. We don't really know how that will turn out. So does that mean we're going to be doing nothing in between now and then? No. I asked TGS&A, would you like to volunteer to help with this in the interim? And I was so surprised and pleased that for 3.5 people came up to me afterwards and said, yes, I'd like to help out. And so that's where we are on our side. Perhaps something could get going here, according to not the temporary, this
Existing.
chairman and this constituency. And I don't know whether you'll be serving on this, whether you want to serve on this committee next year. I hope
It's
you
based by
do.
seniority.
But there we go.
One thing when it comes to the noise, I think it's reading things about quality of life. I mean, that's one issue, but really there is a health impact. I was reading today, because I started to do research, and where you say with the leaf blowers, a whole bunch of them, they go it faster, but within 15 minutes of exposure to high decibels, and if you've got more than one, it doesn't increase the number of decibels, but it does increase the intensity. I mean, you can have hearing loss in 15 minutes, okay? So you have this kind of, and it's cumulative, so if you have this constantly, people are gonna really start suffering with
Well, you also
impairment.
you might be referring to employees themselves.
And but some of them, they wear their earmuffs all the time. They know it. You've got, like the other day or a week ago, I went walking and they were doing it right at the corner where there's a school bus stop. So these children and their parents are exposed to this high level of noise for even if it's a short period of time. If this is repeated, they're going to start suffering. So I think we really have to. There's a lot of things that we have to look at in terms of the physical impact, the emotional, and just general quality of life issues.
But that wasn't what the
Yeah.
selectmen gave us as an assignment,
Right.
though. So do we consider broadening their assignment, or do we keep it within
Well,
the
that's what
schedule?
Frank was suggesting, and suggesting this could be a much
We won't get anywhere.
bigger
Yeah.
task than
Right,
picking a
exactly
few
right.
hours for various
Yeah.
types of equipment.
Well, Granite started that path of
Yeah.
looking at it from a health standpoint, and the reality was they wanted to have all these carve-outs, and the health director said, in essence, you can't do this part-time, so she kind of put the kibosh on everything.
It's
Yeah,
going back
and
to
this
the
is-
full RTM and
Yeah, and
grant
this is
stuff.
the health committee, health and safety committee, so we've got to incorporate health.
Well, I think our charge always should be that we want to protect and preserve everyone's health
Yes,
and
exactly.
well-being, but at the same time, we don't want to be like overly prescriptive or overly broad with our regulations, I think. At
Because
least
this-
that's where I am.
But,
These
I-
equipments are legal.
Yeah, and I am
They're
No,
legal.
they're legal.
They're-
forgetful sometimes, and I don't remember to bring earplugs with me every time I go on a walk with my dog. As if in case I, have to pass these landscapers or whatever, and some of them, I mean, it's courtesy that some of them will stop
Well, we'll-
if they see you walking and others don't.
We'll address
So
that.
There's a lot of things involved, yeah.
Well, there are a lot of stops on the rabbit hole. And the
So what-
rabbit hole may be
I know.
police sirens,
Yeah, that's another one.
the noise of a band in a
So,
parade.
but you have,
And
we
if you
have
don't
a-
define that, you're going to get
Just-
caught up in a lot of that
Just-
stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Beth.
just to understand Genesis, we do have noise ordinances.
Right.
People, when there's a noise complaint, they call the police. Police most often respond, right? So
Yeah, tell them.
I'm having too loud a party,
Yeah,
police
turn it
knock at
down.
my door.
Yeah.
Why can't that be, that works? If my neighbors it's an extraordinary amount of noise and it's 6 a.m. or something, maybe I'd call the police and say they're making, too much noise. That's a disturbance of the peace. That's a
Well,
noise
those are-
ordinance call.
Yeah, but I think there's issues like the garbage trucks, it's just their course of business. They have these metal containers that they pick up in the air and they
Yeah.
slam them down. That's not a one-off, that's
Right,
constant.
There's no
right.
deterrence if you're actually asking the police department to chase after every complaint.
Right.
If there's a rule and the people that
Okay.
are making the noise know
I
about
see.
it,
Yeah.
including your neighbors.
And they don't, yeah.
Well, it's also view that the first 6 months, say with
Yeah,
RTM,
yeah, that's right.
does pass something, the first 6 months is going to be interesting, difficult. But after that, people will know that the contractors will know and the landscapers will know
And I-
that stay away from Darien in the
I
morning.
think that's what's happened with the blight ordinance. There was a lot of backed up things they had to work on, and once they worked through that, I think going forward, there's a lot of things aren't, it's not repeat, it's.
And I think we have to be
it's-
careful as it's implemented, we to keep an eye on
I think.
The nature, the quality of life, as you say, but the quality of enforcement should be within moderation and with a certain amount of understanding, maybe a warning ticket, 3 warning tickets, I don't know.
I think as a matter of consideration, if you're looking very narrowly at the issue of like lawn products, what I had seen in other towns, just sort of as a forewarning, is pass-through of additional costs, right? I think one landscape owner highlighted that to purchase and comply and get a new electric leaf blower, for instance, would cost him $3,000 per unit, right? So his argument was pretty simple, which was, I'm going to pass that through to the customer. So, quality of life and peace and quiet is one thing, but like we're sort of staring down the barrel of a pretty roughshod economy. And is that something we're willing to deal with as an outcropping of an overly restrictive?
I think Lois's point is that's not part of our charge. I mean, we can talk about that, but the reality is we're talking about setting time limits for doing this work.
For garbage and
landscaping. But we should think a little bit more. There are other things that happen possibly early in the morning. I mean, if contractors are working early in the morning, you've got painters that are coming out with they're spraying on the side of the house. They're power washing. And that's very noisy also.
Yeah.
But we have a noise
experienced that.
ordinance, right, that says contractors can't have to wait till a certain time to start? Isn't that true?
Yes, Your Honor, but I don't know the specifics of it.
I think I have it.
You're on this.
I am. Just keep talking, I'll find it.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Article 3, offenses involving public peace and order. Section 38-51, noise. A, noise prohibited. Noise levels that exceed the standards established by the state under regulations set forth in sections 22A-69-1 through 22A-69-7.4 shall be prohibited in the town. B, administration and enforcement. This section shall be enforced by the town police department with the assistance of the town health department for measuring noise levels. Violations and penalties. Any person found in violation of the provisions of this section shall be fined under section 1 through 8. And then it lists the code and the ordinances. State law reference, noise pollution control, GS sections 22A through 67. Blah, 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 local noise ordinance, and some more of the referenced code. Penalties for ordinance violations, and the reference to that code is there as well.
But
And then there's an appendix.
Is there any time
That's
limit?
essentially what you handed around.
8 a.m. or
Right,
something.
yep, so this is from, what I just read is from
Yeah.
the town website, town Muni code, and what you're holding there is from DEEP.
I guess the
So,
question is, do we have a current time for contractors?
I thought
We do
it
not.
was 7
Okay.
somewhere.
So maybe
I
that's
was-
just custom,
I thought
it's
it was
not,
7.
it's not
I
anything
think
that's
7,
enforceable.
and then the other was 8 for.
But not if it's not included in the,
Yeah.
For construction.
If
I
we
think
can,
it
if we
was
can just
7.
have a reasonable time for certain functions, that might be a good starting place, right?
Mhm.
So Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock, construction is probably not the time we'd want to have.
Well, yeah, and then
So-
the noise ordinance now says from 8 a.m. For anybody, till 8 p.m.
But
that they
that's my
can
question,
make
where does it
noise.
say that?
I think on the town, the town.
I mean, this
How's
is just
that?
the specific
Yeah, the
code
town
regarding
has its
noise
own.
ordinances under offenses involving public peace and order. I didn't get further into like the penalty section, which is way further behind, but I mean, my printer kind of gave up on
But
me,
by
so.
defining the time, that would take care of your garbage trucks.
Well-
That would take care of some of the,
No, but see,
Lawn care.
the contractors are different, I think that's a different time. But this is for, like, regular residents, would be like 8 to 8, like for homeowners. And I think for special projects, they have another time.
Well, for the
Right,
purposes
and I
of the
read that.
state, also underneath the state code, there's different categorizations
Right.
of like what type of noise is allowed where.
Right,
So like,
right,
if
right.
you're a residential home, we're under section A.
Right.
If it's commercial, you're
Right,
under B,
right,
and if
right.
you're like,
So-
the
Right.
US Air
And
Force Base, you're under C.
And
you know?
snow plowing
so
is separated
it would
from
pay,
that,
maybe we
even
should
from the
look at the
homeowners.
details and then see if we can enforce it. Because
Yeah.
maybe
Oh, enforce
maybe the
it.
fact is more enforcement, maybe they're already
Right.
there.
Well, some
Well,
of it's
some of
already
it
there, and
is.
some people don't
Yeah.
care about, they
Well, they may
break
not be aware
ordinances
of it.
anyway.
That, they
Well,
may
it's not
be
easy to
aware.
find on the town website, I was just looking.
Yeah, I read
I
it
mean-
somewhere, I know
do
that.
they specifically give noise levels? at
They
the state
do.
level, or is that what you're
They
saying?
do, yeah. If you look at what the state has on, just right at the top of that DEEP website, all you have to do is Google like State of Connecticut noise regulations, and it comes up under that deep website. You can read it. It's all organized by letter and code, and it's all prescribed right there.
So
They
then
have
I
a
think
lot
going
of-
back to the contractors or the garbage, and looking first, if we know what the state is, what the state regs are, have them then go have a conversation with them based on what's already out there, because they're probably not following it, because they may not even know about it, right? So that would be probably a good spot to start, and that could be your straw man from there.
I would also raise, I mean, the one meeting I'm thinking of that I re-looked it up again before this meeting is like Westport, and I'm by no means saying we should be doing anything that Westport's doing. We have to figure out our own path here. But in terms of time constraints, they not only have times that certain types of lawn care products might be used. In this instance, it's 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 p.m. on Saturday, and never on Sundays. They also have date ranges that these are not allowed to be
Now,
utilized whatsoever.
is that for homeowners as well?
Yeah, and then they have exceptions, right? I didn't even think about this, but just exceptions such as like storm cleanup, exceptions for people cleaning on town property, exceptions for town property that has more than 20 acres. Well, we just have Great Island. So public utilities are exceptions too. So, I mean,
Right.
I can't tell you how many times my property backs up to the railroad in some capacity. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Eversource sort of doing whatever they're doing with no controls on them. So there's a lot of different aspects to think about with this, even if you want to try and be as narrow as possible. I just think we have to be very careful and thoughtful.
Absolutely.
Well, the exception too is even a
That'd be a
homeowner
very
with the
exciting
snow
project.
blowers, they can use that. Yeah, but we have that somewhere, I know I read it on there's pages and pages of this kind of stuff on something I was reading with the town a long time ago.
Well, I think we should find that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it even had
And see
stuff
what it
about
says.
light, the lighting from neighbors' houses or
Oh,
something coming
zoning.
into yours. One candle foot, it's like, how long is a candle foot, you know?
That'd be good to
And
bring
you
Jeremy
need-
in,
Yes, that was there.
Woody?
so, Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
okay, well, we got work to do.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the airtime.
All right,
All right.
thank you, Frank.
I don't have any other announcements. Any announcements?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay,
Second,
okay, great.
right? It's
All right, thank
probably
you.
like-
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The pla- You know what, the